Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who just signed a long-term deal with the New England Patriots. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, I could use about $30 million right now. Patriots, give me a call. I don't know what I'll do, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure something out, I think, for that price tag. Kyle, a ton to talk about. It's been I think a very eventful free agency period. Going into it, I was wondering, okay, we don't have a ton of huge names on the market, but there's been some wild moves.
There has definitely been some wild moves, some big money thrown around, lots to talk about in that regard. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't the strongest free agency class by any means. There was no wow, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley sort of situation here. Couple, interesting moves I think we could talk about, but I think the big story of the weekend and extended weekend was these some of these big name trades that happened, and obviously that was a lot to talk about that made this a lot more compelling for sure.
Yeah, some very fascinating trades. Someone asked me, is it Krugers or Krughead? Is that like what people that are Team Jackson are? Like Krugheads? I like that.
It's just your fan page, your Stan accounts.
Okay, I think Stan accounts. Krugheads is the correct one, I think.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Credit to that commentator for coming up with that. Kyle, let me just explain what we're going to do here. It's more of a free-form show. We don't have any massive structures. I do have some topics to go over, but we're just going to talk about the biggest events that have happened so far in free agency. We will get more in depth in future episodes. We will do our team-by-team breakdown next week. So be on the lookout for that. We should be back on our normal time Wednesday next week for that. But yeah, I think you talk about the big trades. Should we just start off with probably the biggest one, which was, I don't believe we'd had a chance to talk about this, the Geno Smith to the Raiders one, which I think was kind of a real shocker.
Very much a real shocker. And yeah, this was the biggest trade, obviously, of the weekend. A couple of big trades over the weekend, but this was the more, I think, interesting, impactful one. Because, yeah, I mean, nobody really saw this one coming. We were kind of, I think we even said last week when we were talking about free agent quarterbacks, could the Raiders be a destination for a team? Because is Pete Carroll really going to be interested in developing a young quarterback as his starter year one at his age and all that sort of thing? So they still may draft somebody, but I doubt it at this point. They get a guy in Geno Smith who I think is pretty good. And yeah, I mean, it was really shocking. I was surprised to see that play out the way that it did. So they trade for Geno Smith, and the Seahawks are, interesting overall weekend for the Seahawks. They make this move and they go and get the quarterback, obviously, and Sam Darnold over the weekend as well. And I think those obviously go together. So there's a lot to talk about there. I guess the question I have is Sam Darnold an upgrade over Geno Smith? And I don't really know if that's what I believe. I don't think so, but he was last season. So maybe it continues for Seattle.
Yeah, let's take this from the Raiders' perspective first, and then we'll get into the Seahawks, who I think we're probably both in agreement that this is just an obvious win. If you can get a starting caliber quarterback for a third-round pick, a guy who, Kyle, you were saying at a certain point last year should have been in the MVP discussion, is only a third-round pick. I mean, that feels like a pretty big slam dunk, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they get a guy who, he's a very good player. I really like his game. I think he's really accurate with the ball. I think he runs the offense really well, and he's going to have a decent amount of weapons to throw to. It's not going to be quite as good as Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf, but with Jacoby Myers, with Brock Bowers in this offense, they have something to build on now with this group, and it's exciting. This is a team that you didn't really know what direction they were going in. They won a few games into the season that moved them out of a draft pick, and this kind of solved the equation for them. Like I said, they still may go back and get a quarterback, but it gives them the opportunity now to where they don't have to necessarily draft for that need. They can go and get what they feel is the best player in the draft available, and maximize their talent that way, which I think is the right way to handle it.
Let me ask you, because I've heard this criticism of this trade. Is it for the Seahawks, going for Pete Carroll, going for Geno Smith, are they maybe not shooting for the stars here? Maybe are they shooting for, I don't know, a tall building instead?
Seattle's perspective?
Yeah. Or no, the Raiders' perspective. Are they not that is a weird analogy. Are they not necessarily trying for a championship here, but maybe instead just trying to be competent? Are they not? Is this a move that's going to win them a championship?
Maybe not, but I don't know if there was going to be a move that makes them championship contenders in the next 3, 4, 5 years, right? Like there's so much unknown with that it makes it so difficult. I will say that they got a guy who makes them a lot better, that can make them competitive in the playoffs. And I mean, look, year to year, the NFL can be weird. It can get weird. Things can happen, an injury could happen, something weird could happen. Someone could develop and take a huge leap, and all of a sudden you're either a lot better or in a lot worse position than you thought you were. It wouldn't shock me if the Raiders are in playoff contention next season. It wouldn't shock me if the Raiders, are challenging some really competitive teams. I don't know if they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, but I think we get way too much wrapped up into the idea of every team has to be trying to win a Super Bowl or tanking for the first overall pick. And I just don't think that's the strategy that should be applied in the NFL all the time. Like, yes, eventually you do need to have that formation of what this is going to be, but it's so easy to turn your team around in the NFL, I feel like, and a lot easier to just accumulate talent to the point where I just think you can draft great players in the middle of the first round and get quality starters, Pro Bowlers even, that you don't necessarily need to go all out and say, like, we need the first overall pick, we need to tank now. Just go get good players and make your team better and see what happens.
I think I agree. Yeah. Sometimes you need to walk before you can run. Like sometimes, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a Super Bowl by being a good enough roster that they could attract Tom Brady. The Rams did something similar. The Eagles, you could argue, like they drafted a quarterback in the second round, right? Sometimes it's not about having a first overall pick. Although I can also understand why a team would take that route, but you don't have to. Let's talk about Sam Darnold a bit. Let's talk about the Seahawks, and they have had a busy offseason. I think we'll touch on the DK Metcalf thing in a second as well. But getting rid of a lot of known players, and I mean, the logic behind the move is, okay, Sam Darnold was better last year than Geno Smith, although I don't think it was a huge gap, but the numbers were a lot better, at least for Darnold. And he's 27, whereas Geno Smith is 35. It feels like that's the main thing, right?
Yeah, that's the huge factor of it. Obviously, Geno Smith is an older quarterback. That plays a huge factor in it. And it does give Seattle an opportunity to reset their clock a little bit here with the younger quarterback. However, I'm still always going to be skeptical of Sam Darnold. I mean, obviously, it's easy to say that when the last two games did not go as they anticipated. However, this is a player who still, I think, overall has some struggles, and he's not throwing to Justin Jefferson anymore. So how is this going to look this season in Seattle? I think he got a fair contract based on his value. I think Seattle, in the end, like, you can make a lot of logic to the move. Like you said, you're trading a 35-year-old for a third-round pick. You're bringing in a younger quarterback to make it happen. But it could just be reshuffling the decks. We'll see. But I don't know if I come away from this weekend thinking Seattle got better from this situation. Not to mention they traded one of their best players on the team as well. So all that put together, it's just like I want to see the vision play out first before I really vote this a slam dunk.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's a questionable thing. I mean, part of me wonders if maybe they aren't in love with Geno Smith. Maybe they don't see him the way we do and feel like this is an upgrade. I think it's just the age thing. I think maybe Seattle feels like we're not really where we want to be right now. I don't know. It's because when they traded away Geno Smith, I was kind of like, oh, they're doing the NBA thing of let's just blow it up even though we're okay. Let's try to be bad so we can get a draft pick. I'm like, okay, I get the logic there. But yeah, I mean, part of me, I can't help but think how much of this has to do with the fact that Sam Darnold, when he played Seattle, was amazing in that game, made maybe the throw of the year, and kind of ended the Seahawks season. Like, how much is that playing a factor in this?
It could be playing a big factor. I mean, it's easy when it's like right in front of your face, like, oh, this is awesome sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, it's an interesting aspect. I think what was really surprising about it was the Geno trade was surprising to begin with. We did not see that necessarily coming. But when it did happen, it happened on the cusp about, like, we knew the DK Metcalf trade was going to happen. when the Geno Smith trade ended up happening, surprisingly. So when that happened, it was just one of those things. It's like, okay, yeah. So then now they're just going to tank. They're going to rebuild around some of their young players and figure it out from there. And then immediately after that, Schefter tweeted like, oh, now there's another opening for Sam Darnold in the free agent market, the Seattle Seahawks. And then that just made my head scratch. Like, why would you make all of this happen to then get another veteran quarterback? Unless they just viewed that they're going to clean house from that one. Darnold fits the timeline of Jackson Smith and Jigba anymore. They're going to get a good player in the draft, and then they're going to go from there. I can understand both sides of it. It's just a fascinating decision-making, I think, overall. And I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, I don't know. I think they got a terrific receiver. They got a quarterback who played very, very well last season. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this offense is still pretty good next season, but I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a step back.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, I mean, again, the two things are, do they just view Darnold as better? Or, like, again, I think it's just Geno Smith's going to be 35 next year. Is it, hey, we like Geno Smith, we like Sam Darnold, we view them as similar players, but Geno Smith wanted a contract extension. Let's not give it to him, and instead let's just, go with a different guy, and we could have him for 10 years instead of 3.
Yeah. And it's one of those things we've talked about so many times when it comes to some of these veteran quarterbacks, and they're actually doing the ballsy ones enough to do it. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think that when we said the logic of letting your veteran quarterback go instead of paying him, it wasn't to pay another veteran quarterback who we're still skeptical about. That's the weird thing. It's usually to draft and start over, because there was a lot of like, I felt like Jackson Dart's name came up a lot for the Seahawks at that point, and maybe they still draft a quarterback. Who knows? But it just felt like a very interesting scenario to play out, to where it like I said, it just felt like reshuffling the deck.
Yeah, after what Atlanta did last year, who knows with drafting quarterbacks, but who will and who won't. But the other aspect that we have to mention is, like, I think you kind of touched on it. We don't know if Darnold is great. Like, he was very good last year in the system, but also, like, he does hold on to the ball for too long, and he had a really good pass protecting offensive line. He did melt down in the last 2 games of the season. Like, there is the concern of, he had a Case Keenum-like year, and now you're going to be, not only are you going to be on the hook for paying him this money, but also you could potentially have let a quarterback who is good in your system walk out the door. That's probably why I wouldn't have done it. It's just the unknown factor.
Yeah. Who would you have rather paid for the next 3 years between these two?
I think if I'm the Raiders, I think I would rather have Sam Darnold. If I'm the Seahawks, I would take the guy who's already in the system.
Yeah. It's just fascinating, because, like, you definitely feel like they took a step behind Los Angeles, like a significant step behind. Like, that's the tough part, is like it, I think the Raiders, like, I feel like we're playing both sides of the same thing, where it's like, well, the Raiders aren't trying to tank and the Seahawks aren't trying to tank, but we're applauding the Raiders for it. I definitely felt like the Raiders came out of this weekend a better football team. That's the difference. And I'm not sure, like, Seattle became a better football team for the present or the future.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another move Seattle made. DK Metcalf is a Pittsburgh Steeler, wanted to go to warm weather Pennsylvania. I mean, so again, he requested a trade. The Seahawks say, okay, we're willing to kind of, again, I thought at the time it was more of a, like, okay, let's fully rebuild, although they seem to be maybe, I don't know, retooling, whatever you want to call it. But they honored his trade, and the Pittsburgh Steelers finally get another receiver. It seems like they've been in on all of these potential wide receivers that could have been traded. They were in on the Brandon Ayuk thing. Finally get DK Metcalf, in which immediately the most volatile wide receiver room, in the league.
Yeah. Just like, who do we need? We need them to play like CJ Gardner-Johnson next season. That's what we need. We just need that would be a full fist fight right there. Who did he get traded to? The Texans, right? Are they on the schedule? We need that to happen. Yeah. Interesting trade for sure. Obviously, we saw this one coming and all that kind of stuff. And, I understand both sides of it. I think that the Steelers get a very good player. They instantly have one of the best receiver duos in the league. I like DK Metcalf. I was on some text threads of people who really, I felt like, we're underrating DK Metcalf, and this is coming from the guy who was saying he was their second best receiver all of last year. And it was just me more liking Smith and Jigba more. And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because, like, I think it's the right move for Pittsburgh. I don't know how much closer it gets them. Obviously, we need to see how the rest of the offseason plays out because there's no quarterback to throw the ball to these two receivers, but they are very physical on the outside. They are very big on the outside now, and both of those guys are really good too.
Yeah. They do not play the Texans this season, unfortunately. They play the Lions. Could that be chippy? The Lions have some defensive backs who can be there's potential there.
Yeah, I think that could be a fun one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just give us all the toxic energy. We need some old school AFC North playoff battles with these two. That's what I need.
Yeah, I think we will. I think we'll get it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good move. Like, I think DK Metcalf's a really good young player. The biggest comparison I can think of was the AJ Brown trade. A few years back. I know now I think we view AJ Brown as a better player, but at the time he wasn't really considered like a top 5 receiver in football. He was kind of considered more closer to what we consider DK Metcalf.
Yeah, that was a surprising thing. He went for so low, but he also needed a contract as well, so that plays a factor. And he got paid. I mean, that's a big contract. So I understand why maybe that lowered the asking price a little bit for the draft capital. But at the same time, like, it feels like a big contract, but like it feels like this salary cap's going up $30 million a year every year. So like, I've seen like some people, I feel like I've seen every big free agent move and trade, like, oh, that's an overpay for the contract and all that sort of thing. And it's like, well, in 2 years, these contracts are, going to be underpaid compared to their value for the position. So it's fascinating to see how that plays out. But yeah, I think they got a very, very, very good player. Even if he can be frustrating at times, even if he has a little bit of an attitude problem. Well, great wide receiver hasn't had an attitude problem, honestly. And I think that once they figure out this quarterback thing, which one are they going to use? Is it Russell Wilson? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Who knows? But they're definitely going for it this year.
What do you mean? They have Skylar Thompson on their roster.
Oh yeah, that'll be a good one.
He almost won a playoff game.
He almost won a playoff game indeed.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Let's go to, why don't we go with Justin Fields' old team, I said it backwards. Why don't we go with a former Pittsburgh Steeler, Justin Fields, going to a new team, which is the New York Jets. He signs a 2-year, $40 million deal. How do we feel about this from the Jets' perspective and from Fields' perspective?
I think I'm okay with it with both perspectives. Like, I kind of just shrug my shoulders. Like, I don't think the Jets are going to be good next season. And I'm not convinced Justin Fields is good. So it's like, the Jets get one more chance to be like, is there anything left in this guy? Right. Like, it's a, $40 million is still a decent amount for like, let's see what he has kind of thing. But, they had to pay somebody to play quarterback, and they're going to get him in the room. They're going to give him a couple years probably here to see what happens. But yeah, I don't expect it to work out this season. And, I think it's going to be a very, very interesting Jets team because I still think they got a ton of holes on that offense that they have to fill.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because last year the team was definitely, I feel like, worse than the some other parts, right? Like, it was just, they had, like, it felt like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is okay. Like, Davante Adams is okay. Garrett Wilson's all right. It's like, well, then why are they losing every game? I do feel like I kind of like this move, Kyle, just because, like, again, what are you going to do? The Jets don't have a high draft pick to get a quarterback unless they want to trade up or something. So let's just go with Justin Fields. He's an option. You have Tyrod Taylor also, who, like, maybe you figure something out. Let's just see what we have in Justin Fields. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely no fault to it because, like, it's very low risk and, potentially high reward, but, the percentage chance of the high reward is probably low. But like I said, it's just trying to see what you have in that position. I think it's going to be really tough because I just don't think this roster around him is very good right now until they figure some things out because, like, they don't have a left tackle currently. It's going to be Olu Fashanu, I'm assuming, filling into that spot, but they still have holes in that offensive line. The secondary receiver options are not ideal for this team. And then all of a sudden, it's just a lot of new faces, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and then you have Justin Fields. That's an athletic backfield. That could be fun. But yeah, it's just like you're taking a chance on something, and I don't hate that, but like I'm not expecting this team to score a lot of points, but I've been wrong before and I could be wrong again. Maybe he has the bounce back season and that career breakout year we've been waiting for.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I'm not going to bet on the Jets being good. It's going to take a lot, but I also think like the Aaron Glenn of it all. A big part of how the Lions were able to, I think, establish a winning culture. It might have been in part because you had Jared Goff, who wasn't like, oh, if Jared Goff comes in and starts playing amazing, then we'll start winning games. I think it can help kind of. I feel like, in some ways with the Jets, like, okay, Aaron Rodgers, once he gets here, then we'll start being great. Or once Zach Wilson starts stepping it up, then we'll be great. Once Sam Darnold steps it up, then we'll be great. That's not the case with Fields, and maybe that can help install this winning culture for Aaron Glenn.
Yeah. If anything, it's going to be a better culture than last year. Like it's certainly going to be a lot more likable. I mean, yeah, it's certainly going to be a lot more likable of a situation. Field seems like a great guy. I haven't seen him on Pat McAfee yet. Maybe that changes going into next year. I don't know exactly what the contract situation says for that, but yeah, he seems like a much more likable guy, and I think this is going to be a much better situation for him and the team. But yeah, it's just, is the talent there? We saw glimpses of it last season, and we were really excited at times. And he played a lot better in Pittsburgh than he did in Chicago. And a lot of that was that they were kind of putting the training wheels on him, if you will. Like they were not asking him to do a whole lot. It was a lot more of like game manager situation plus like design run plays, because he's really not that great of a scrambler. He's more of a good design runner, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, how they are able to utilize his skill set. I mean, there's a reason he was drafted highly. He was rated highly in high school, and he was good in college. He has a very unique and, abundance of skills. Can you harness that into a good NFL quarterback? I don't know.
I think I would push back a little on he's not a good scrambler. I think he can definitely get himself into trouble, but he can also, I think he's, boom or bust.
He's also athletic enough to get himself out of trouble. Yes, yeah. I agree.
Right. But one other factor that we should just mention, hey, him and Garrett Wilson playing together again. College teammates, now NFL teammates.
There you go. Maybe that fixes everything.
Probably. It'll probably fix everything, I think. Let's move on.
What's your Jets Super Bowl ticket at right now? What'd you bet?
I am not this year going to put them into Super Bowl contenders tier list to start the year. I think I'm not doing that again.
Are you sure? All right. Maybe next year.
I think so. We'll see how the rest of the offseason goes. I don't know. Maybe. But probably not. Maybe if they get Stephon Diggs, I think that'll push him over the top.
Yeah, that's all they need. And I just said they wanted to fix the locker room. You want Stephon Diggs?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not the best move. Another player that apparently a team doesn't want, Laremy Tunsil, traded by the Houston Texans. The Texans have they went into the season saying, you know what our issue was last year? Our offensive line is too good. We need to get rid of some of these guys. This is our issue. Getting rid of, granted, Kenyon Green might be addition by subtraction. They also get rid of Laremy Tunsil, though. This was a trade that, on paper, I'll say, like, I don't think is a horrible trade on paper, which is maybe a hot take. Like a second and a third round pick for an aging player who is still very good. That's not that crazy. But I think the question is, why is Houston doing this, and why are they doing this now? You have a quarterback on a rookie deal. You've won playoff games both years he's been there. Why are you getting rid of him when really your biggest issue is offensive line?
It is interesting because they spent a ton of money last offseason, so they didn't have a lot of like maneuverability, it felt like, as far as cap space goes. So they had to make some moves to kind of like clear things out, but like this felt like the weirdest solution to it, right? Like we've seen so many teams just restructure deals, create extensions to, extend out those deals, lower the cap hits, all that sort of stuff to, create cap space. And the Texans decided to trade their best offensive lineman. Like it really was a bizarre situation, I think, overall, because yeah, I mean, he's going to be missed. This wasn't a great offensive line last season. And yes, they traded their worst offensive lineman along with their best offensive lineman, but their best offensive lineman was still very, very good. So definitely going to be tough to overcome that. Not a strong group necessarily from all five of their starting positions last year. And I don't know how it gets better without this guy. He is like you said, he's expensive. He's older. He's still very good. I feel like the lesson from this weekend of the offseason is age is just becoming more and more of a priority, it feels like, for every NFL team. Like, look at the guys at certain ages in free agency felt like they got significantly higher amount of money compared to older players who are probably better at the same positions. And it was just an interesting aspect for me.
Yeah, we have to stop acting surprised when guys with $30 million cap hits and are 30 years old are getting traded for not as much value as what makes sense. Like the value is just never going to be what you expect in those situations. So it's like, honestly, I get the trade. Like I don't think it's like horrible value or anything like the DeAndre Hopkins thing was like, okay, let's move off of him, and then it's like seemingly took the best deal, like the first deal they got, right? Like this is I don't think it's like there was a team wasn't going to give you a first for Laremy Tunsil. I don't think. Like I think this is what you were going to get was a second and a third. It's just I question the decision making of the team to do this and then to again trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson, which I think that was a great trade. I think they easily won that trade, but also like we're now putting more resources into our defense and the offensive line, and we saw CJ Stroud not play as well last year, and I think a big part of it was he didn't have time to throw.
Yeah. I mean, it plays a huge part of it. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting because part of the reason why, like I said, I like the trade for the Raiders as far as Geno Smith is it allows you to not necessarily draft for need. And it feels like now the Texans have to draft for need at their pick. I think they're like the 25th pick or something because they don't have a left tackle that I feel comfortable with. They have to get a guy at that position unless they go for like a Cam Robinson or something like that. This is not a strong tackle free agency class. Just wasn't. And so now it feels like they have to get a guy in the draft, and that's probably what they're going to be doing with their 25th pick or looking for one at least. And that makes it complicated because the teams around you know you're looking for it. So they're going to be trading around you to try and get that. You may have to move up to get your guy. And it just creates a whole lot of headache that I feel like they could have avoided by keeping their guy in a certain extent or figuring out a better solution for their left tackle before this spot. But it'll be interesting to see how the Texans adjust to this. But yeah, they definitely have some holes on their offensive line they have to fill. But yeah, it's just funny that it's like, this was not a great trade for me overall. Like you said, they got decent value for his age and position and salary, but it wasn't a great trade for me overall because it makes you worse. And then like they made a great trade with the CJ Gardner-Johnson one that felt like a fleecing almost.
Yeah. I guess the one argument probably if you're a Texans fan is, well, okay, we got worse at one position, but if we can spread that money out and be better at like three other positions, it's better to have an offensive line full of competent players than one really good offensive lineman and then a handful of bad ones.
That is true. Yeah, I mean it's definitely, you don't want a weak link there, but they need to have a strong link first.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Let's transition to the team that got Laremy Tunsil, the Balls. Let's talk some Balls here, Kyle, who have been very busy. We knew that they were going to be making moves this offseason, although they haven't exactly done what we expected. They did go defense with paying Javon Kinlaw $15 million a year. That's a decision that they made. They also decided to trade for Deebo Samuel and for Laremy Tunsil, as we just talked about. I have mixed feelings about this free agency period. On one hand, they got better. And if we're using that as the measuring stick of, are you better today than you were yesterday? Well, yes, they are better. I think my question is, how much better did they ultimately get when they had so much resources to take steps? Like I expected them this free agency period to take steps forward, and I'm questioning how far forward they have actually gotten.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Like their offense, in theory, if healthy, should be pretty nasty next season. You get Jaden Daniels, who's obviously a stud. You bring in Deebo Samuel to pair with Terry McLaurin. If Deebo Samuel stays healthy, that is a big if. Laremy Tunsil, if he's healthy as well, is a very good offensive lineman. That's all going to help you there. This could be one of the best offenses in the league next year, honestly. So that's a very exciting thing. But, you mentioned, like, it's sometimes it's not a bad idea to build on strength and just say, like, look, we weren't going to make a great defense overnight in free agency, so let's just build on our strength and then plug in the defense as we can and figure it out. And Dan Quinn's a great defensive coach, so he's going to try and maximize that group, kind of like he did last year at times where they probably shot above their weight, played above their weight a few times more than we expected. But yeah, it's just like, you released Jonathan Allen to sign Javon Kinlaw. They bring back Bobby Wagner and they sign Will Harris, and that's basically their defensive moves. It doesn't leave me a lot of optimism that this defense is ever going to take a step forward. And in fact, I would probably bet on it to regress overall because, I do think that at times they played better than they should have because it wasn't that great of a defense statistically. So if they're able to, if they do regress defensively, they got to be pretty awesome offensively now for this to work out.
Yeah, they're down to just 32 million in cap space, so they still can make some or in effective cap space. So they still can make some moves to help out this this roster if they want to. Obviously, they're paying now. Laremy Tunsil's getting 21 million. The Texans are still paying him a little bit, but that's what he's getting. Deebo Samuel is getting 17 million, and then Kinlaw is getting for this year his cap hit will only be 7.5 million, but still, yeah. I mean that's the question, right? As of right now, they have one outside corner currently on under contract, which is Marshawn Lattimore. You have Mike Sanderstill as well, who is more of a slot guy, although he can play outside at times. But as a whole, I mean, it's a question mark. They can improve there, like you said, kind of earlier. There is an issue with going into the draft needing a certain position because teams know that and can trade around you to get their players, so then you often have to trade up, and they don't have a ton of draft picks now to trade up. So there's all of that stuff going in. I will say, like, some of these moves I still like in a vacuum, like the Deebo Samuel move, one I like in a vacuum, like the Laremy Tunsil move. I'm never going to defend. I'm never going to criticize a team for protecting their young quarterback. I get that, but I want to see more for their defense right now.
Yeah, they need a lot of help there still. And I mean, you don't know what the negotiations were like. They could have been on all of these guys and just lost out. They still have some cap space to work with, so maybe they improve on the fringes. I know there's not a lot of top end free agents left on the market, so we'll see. But they could still get better, I think, at the end of free agency. And then we'll see what they do at the draft and how they prioritize that. But it's definitely going to be tough to say that they 100% got better because, like I said, I think that there is a chance this defense regresses a little bit more. And then it's just like you have to be – it could be like a Bengals situation. That Bengals offense got a lot better last year compared to 2 years ago, and it was still awesome 2 years ago. It was awesome last year, though. And the defense just took such a huge step back they missed the playoffs, and I don't want that to be the Commanders.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, I guess the flip side is if you're a Commanders fan, hey, look at the playoff game. Sometimes the best defense is the good offense. If they can't stop us, we don't need a few stops defensively.
Yeah. So it could still happen. I mean, like I said, there's a long offseason still to go. There's still plenty of intrigue that it's going to happen. But I still think they need a few additions here to really, really convince me that they can challenge the NFC again and potentially make a Super Bowl.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. Few more key moves, but let's go to our teams. Why don't we, Kyle? Let's start off with your team, the Patriots, who we said going in we're going to be, big spenders in this free agency period. We weren't. It wasn't a hot take. That was kind of what was expected. As when we did our predictions, we both had many players going to the Patriots. You correctly guessed Milton Williams going to the Patriots. I correctly guessed Carlton Davis going to the Patriots. You're up by one in that game, by the way. I've been keeping track. But
how many guys are left?
A few. We got. So there's still Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious Ward, Rasul Douglas, Cam Robinson, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers.
I think Ward signed. Did he go to the Colts? Yeah,
I've seen. You might be right about that. Actually, there's also been some fake signings. Like I saw someone saying Joe Bosa signed, but that hasn't been officially announced yet. So there's been some. It's always you got to be careful here.
That's fair. But sorry to derail us here. We're talking Patriots. So they made a few big signings. Obviously, they got a few guys that they needed in the building, and some of it was overpay. I was reading a bit of some people's reactions on it, and listen, that Milton Williams one is definitely a big number. I think the Carlton Davis one is definitely a big number. But at the same time, I don't care because I've been saying it for a number of weeks and honestly probably multiple years on this podcast. This team just lacked blue chip talent, and that they just lacked it from almost every position group on the team, And when you lack that much talent, sometimes overpaying for some guys doesn't really hurt. And this team had more money than God in free agency. They had $127 million in cap space to work with going into free agency. They had so many positions to fill. And so, yeah, I'm not really going to complain about them spending some money, even if it is too much money at spots, because like I think Milton Williams is a really good player. I think he's going to be terrific for them, and I think it is a good signing in that regard. I think Carlton Davis is a really good player. He's moving into a number 2 corner spot against one of the best man-to-man corners in the league on his other side. I think that's going to be a really fun group overall. I like Spillane a lot too. I think he's a good run stuffing linebacker. I think him and Jawan Bentley, and I just look at the spine of this team all of a sudden, which was really struggling last year at times. They trade Devon Godshaw, who just has been a disaster since he got here. You're now looking at a healthy Christian Barmore next season, Milton Williams on the defensive line. You got Spillane and a healthy Jawan Bentley in the linebacker. And you're looking at Jabril Peppers back in the secondary at safety with Kyle Duggar. All of a sudden, the spine of this defense just looks really, really good. And that's not even mentioning their best defensive player, Christian Gonzalez on the outside, and Carlton Davis as your 2-man corners. I really like that group overall all of a sudden. If they stay healthy, I think that Patriots defense could be very good. And that was the biggest success of this free agency class.
Yeah, can't help but mention you didn't. Can't help but notice you didn't mention Harold Landry in that. How do you feel about that one?
Didn't love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he's a very much an empty calories guy. We'll see. He has a high propensity to not get pressures, but get sacked on those pressures. So maybe that's just something he's good at. That being said, I don't think he's a strong player. But I also, like I said, I think he's an empty calories guy. But I think Keon White's a guy who's probably a little better than what his numbers say. So maybe that cancels each other out. There's also still the Abdul Carter factor as far as the draft goes. They could be looking to add an edge guy at the top of the draft with him. So I didn't love the signing. I don't think he's a very good player, but at the same time, they didn't pay a ton of money for him. And he's someone who knows the system too. So I guess there's that. That's the way you talk yourself into it.
Yeah, can be a locker room guy and also good run defender as well. I think I am somewhere in the middle of Harold Landry. The analytics people hate Harold Landry. I think the casual fans, like Titans fans, when I said I wasn't crazy about Harold Landry a few years ago, I couldn't believe what they were hearing. It felt like, but yeah, I think he's okay. I agree. It's probably not a great contract, but I think he's okay. Kyle, I think that this defense, this free agency period is almost exactly what I feel like the Commanders should have done, of like just going after defensive pieces. They're probably not all going to hit. Probably someone is going to take a step back or not live up to the contract. I don't know if Milton Williams is going to be a $26 million a year player, right? But they're going to improve the defense. They're going to be better, and you have so much cap space. They still have the most cap space available in the NFL after all these moves. That's how much cap space the Patriots had. That being said, they know to have a young quarterback they need to develop, right?
Yeah. They still need some work done there. And look, like, we'll see what happens with guys like Amari Cooper and Stephon Diggs. I still think that could be a factor at play here. And the rumor was they were all in on Chris Godwin. Like, they apparently offered Chris Godwin $30 million a year was what Bill Barnwell reported. And he decided to go back, stay home and stay in Tampa. So, I mean, if you're putting the effort in like that and it doesn't work out, I mean, you just kind of shrug your shoulders. I mean, He turned down a $30 million contract. So, yeah, if that is true. But, so they tried. That being said, outside of like Godwin and obviously the Metcalf sweepstakes, this hasn't been this wasn't an awesome receiver offseason to begin with. So, they go and get a guy like Matt Collins who helps the depth. I expect them to still try and be in the market for a bunch of guys. There's still like Cooper Kupp, who could be a free agent soon, or, just trade a 7th round pick for him. There is still Stephon Diggs coming off the injury. That could be an option. But yeah, they definitely have a few holes still on their team they have to address, whether it's through the draft or through the end of free agency period, because they still have money to spend. Because left guard, left tackle, and number 1 receiver still feel like very big holes.
And they kept Austin Hooper.
Yeah. The thing is, it's just one of those teams where it's almost like Jimmy Butler getting traded to the Warriors for me, where it's like Jimmy Butler all of a sudden shows up on the Warriors and everybody else on the team makes a lot more sense because they're trying to do too much probably, and they're better like the second option's better third option, the third option's a better fourth option sort of thing. Like I actually in theory, I like the idea of Matt Collins. I like the idea of Demario Douglas, and I like the idea of Hunter Henry on this team. It's going to make a lot more sense if there's a number one guy there to help those guys out, because none of those guys are all shooting above their weight right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess let me sort of push back a little bit on the notion of, well, what are you supposed to do? I mean, yes, the Godwin thing is like, okay, it didn't work out. And maybe they thought they were getting Godwin, and that's why they didn't make the DK Metcalf trade. And maybe DK Metcalf didn't want to go there too, right? Because he needed a contract as well. You're not going to trade him if he's not going to sign a long-term deal. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know. But there were like the Joe Thuney trade, right? Like there were options to still improve this offense, even if it wasn't like the Deebo Samuel move is something they could have done, right? Like there were ways to try to pump more resources into this offense. Again, I think that's not how Vrabel operates. I don't think my logic, if I had a team and I had a young quarterback, would be all I care about is helping out the young quarterback. Get him in as good of a situation as possible. And then like, if he stinks, well, then we'll get another quarterback and see if we can use the situation for them. That's not how Vrabel operates. Vrabel is wanting to make this team good. He's wanting to help build a culture. He, fine with making them a defensive first team. But the question you just have to have is, listen, I agree. I like Demario Douglas in a certain role. I like, Matt Collins in a certain role. I like Hunter Henry in a certain role. But when those guys are having to go up against number 1 and 2 corners, I don't like them anymore.
Right. So I think the Patriots, and I think Vrabel, like you said, has taken this to his future stops after that. I think they've always been very particular sometimes. I mean, they've taken their chances for guys like Randy Moss, and they did it with Chad Ochocinco, Albert Haynesworth, stuff like that. It still feels like more times than not, they're very particular about who they bring into the building and who they want around the team. And yeah, I mean, it seems like from the reporting that I read, they prioritized Chris Godwin over DK Metcalf because they didn't want to give up the draft capital and then pay the 5-year contract. They preferred Chris Godwin on a shorter term deal, even if it was similar dollars, because they were, like I said, I think DK's literally on $30 million a year, and they were offering the same for Godwin. They wanted a shorter term contract and they wanted to keep the draft pick. And I guess that was their priority. Was it? I don't know I guess there was no plan B. I mean, plan B could still be happening. Like I said, there are still veteran guys out there. Keenan Allen's another guy that's still kind of lurking around. That could be an option. There are a few options out there. It feels like for New England to go through, and which is why we wait another week to do our free agent grades or our offseason grade, because there's still plenty of time for something to happen. But the priority is something has to happen for New England. So it'll be very interesting to see how they approach that final step, those final steps.
Yeah, I agree. And they have the 3rd overall pick. We'll see if they do use that on offense as well. So there's things to be done still. Let's move on. Well, do you have any more thoughts on the Patriots?
No. I mean, I guess the one thing, like, I did like the Morgan Moses contract a lot. I like the number. I like the player. So that one makes a ton of sense. Slots right in at right tackle. I really like the right side of this offensive line. It's just, those last 2 positions are going to be key.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about Chris Godwin, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was funny because it's right after legal tampering period starts, it's immediately Hassan Reddick signs with the Buccaneers. And I'm like, okay, that's fun, but are we losing Godwin? And then in the video that I was making about Hassan Reddick, Chris Godwin re-signed. So I had a good first, 11 minutes of the NFL legal tampering period. But yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin re-signing is the key one, as he was so good last year, and they should do a similar scheme. I think he'll be good again this next year. It was an ankle injury. Usually guys can bounce back from something like that. And I think this offense could potentially be great again last year. And then the other move is the Hassan Reddick move, who, listen, he was bad last year. There's no getting around it. He was not a good player with the Jets, but also he's had several years in a row of being a very good edge rusher with the, multiple years with the Eagles and a year with the Cardinals as well. And he, on paper, fits the Todd Bowles scheme perfectly. I'm fine with this signing. I know some people are a little bit less happy about it, but so far, I think, I like most of what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done here.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Like you prioritize bringing back your guys, which was the right thing to do. You didn't have a ton of maneuverability, but you solved your 2 biggest issues too, which was punting and edge rusher. Your pass
in that order too.
Yeah, your pass rush was not great last season. And I mean, it made it so much worse that everybody in the secondary, which is a very good secondary when it's healthy, got injured at times.
Mhm.
But the pass rush also just wasn't good enough. And we saw it in some of their biggest games, and they needed to address the position. And like you said, I mean, it's very much a flyer chance here with us on Reddick. I wouldn't be surprised if he bounces back, honestly, just because, like, he didn't do training camp, obviously. He didn't practice a lot. And then all of a sudden he's playing because he's not getting the contract he wants. And now he's going to be desperate to earn that contract again. So I wouldn't be surprised if it works out for him. And I think it's a fantastic job by them by filling out their roster, addressing their needs. And it's another team where I think they use the offseason very smartly to prepare for a draft where they can get best player available and kind of build the depth of this team. It should be a very, very good team next season. And if they, if Reddick hits, this team could compete for a Super Bowl. That's honestly the difference, it feels like, for me, if they stay healthy, of course.
And that's probably the bigger if than anything, given their history the past couple of years. I also kind of feel with this defensive line, it's sort of like what you said with the Patriots, of like, if you just add a one, does that like make everything look better? Of now you have Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey in the middle, and you have Yaya Diaby on the other side, and it's like all of a sudden this feels, and Chris Braswell and Anthony Nelson can be rotational guys. It just feels way better.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely feels like it could figure it out a lot more. And, Reddick at his best is going to be a problem for offensive lines. They're going to have to prepare for him. And then we've seen guys like Kancey and Diaby have some real flashes of potential.
Yeah, and I think with Diaby getting to go up, I still don't think he's number one, but if he can go up against number two tackles, that should help. And again, Reddick with these blitzes that Todd Bowles likes, like that's just a perfect match. I mean, like with how fast he can be, like that just works. If he's still Eagles Hassan Reddick, that should work.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think it's a fantastic offseason. I mean, you have to be thrilled, right? I mean, this is everything worked out the way you wanted it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing was like I was kind of hoping for like a Khalil Mack type thing, but like I can't be that much of a McBayers can't be that much of a chooser. Like, can't pick everything. But yeah, this is, and again, I'm glad we didn't spend a first round pick to give Myles Garrett $40 million a year, even with how good he is.
Yeah. That would have been, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Very good player, but yeah. Let's just talk about that. Why don't we? Myles Garrett says it's not about the money, and then say, what about $40 million a year? And he says, okay, it's a little about the money. Myles Garrett decides to stay with the Cleveland Browns. Kyle, why did the Browns do this?
I don't know, man. Like, I guess at the end of the day, like, it's easy for us to say from our computer chairs, to say like, oh, just restart everything and eat the Myles Garrett money and trade him away and accumulate draft picks and start over. But the fact of the matter is that this Cleveland Browns franchise, for how many years was a bottom feeder? How many years did they really struggle to like keep the fans motivated? And there was already the volatility of the Deshaun Watson trade, and then the Deshaun Watson trade not working out the way they wanted it. And Myles Garrett's probably the biggest name on this team. He's probably the guy that most people have jerseys of on this team at this point. All that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, like, trading him, yes, the idea of trading Myles Garrett probably makes you better for the long term, accumulating draft picks and starting over. But how do you keep the fans engaged for the next 4 or 5 years if you're just going to keep losing? And that's probably what they looked at and said, we can't trade Myles Garrett. Let's just pay him and then figure everything else out for the future.
I get it. I do get it. But the flip side is you could have said the same thing about that with Matthew Stafford and the Lions, and look at how that worked out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a conundrum for sure. But at the same time, like, a great quarterback is not going to, a great edge rusher is not going to do the same. Like, they were the number one pick this past season, and they're probably going to do it again or be in contention again. But yeah, I don't know. It makes them a little bit better and a little bit more like competitive, but at the same time, like, are you expecting the Browns to now win 6 games next year because they have Myles Garrett?
No, but I just feel like by the time they're finally good again, Garrett's going to be in the twilight of his career.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I guess the question I have are the Browns, like, is Kenny Pickett playing quarterback for this team next year?
I don't know. And why did the Eagles going after Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Kenyon Green? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah. I think they just want to prove that they can just revitalize anyone. I mean, what's their offensive line coach names? They love him there, Jeff Stoutland. If he could turn Kenyon Green into a like good offensive lineman, he should get a head coaching job immediately. So,
Yeah, we could do a couple minutes on the Eagles. I mean, that feels like what it is, right? This is a bet.
Yeah, it feels that way. I mean, look, Dorian Thompson-Robinson stinks. I don't care. Like, he is the third quarterback on this team. I think they had the luxury of Tanner McKee look pretty good. And I like Tanner McKee as a backup. So they would probably just like, we have Tanner McKee. Let's trade a guy and then just kind of go from there. So they traded Kenny Pickett. And I don't hate the idea of it. And they needed a third quarterback, I guess. So they get a third quarterback. But yeah, he's not good. Either way, if Jalen Hurts is injured, it's a disaster season no matter what. And if Dorian Thompson-Robinson does have to play football, the Eagles season is over. Just like if Kenny Pickett had to play football, the Eagles season might be over. But yeah, so I think that was the situation there. The Gardner-Johnson trade for Kenyon Green is definitely an interesting one because it feels like their hope is that Kenyon Green's going to replace Mekhi Becton, which is a choice. And then another factor of it too is like, as great as this team is at developing talent, drafting talent, identifying talent, you won the Super Bowl with a fantastic defense and you lost 4 very good starters from last season's Super Bowl team. That is a huge, huge risk to try and figure out.
Yeah, it honestly reminds you a lot of 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl, lost, and then they lost a bunch of defensive players there as well. And hey, the good news is, you can rebuild it. But the bad news is you don't know how quickly you can rebuild it. I would advise against maybe don't go with Matt Patricia again.
Yeah, I would definitely advise against that. They're going to be betting a lot, it feels like, on their depth in the way they've developed talent. Like, obviously, Ajomo is probably going to take on a bigger role. They're going to hope that whatever happened with Bryce Huff last season doesn't happen again, and him and Nolan Smith can replace Josh Sweat. Nolan Smith was obviously good last season. Bryce Huff was not good, but they were able to overcome that. And then it's probably going to be Tristan McCollum and Keely Ringo in the secondary. So those are big risks too. Like, we haven't really seen those guys turn into studs in the secondary. So it's going to be a big risk, and they got a lot to figure out still.
Yeah. Do have a coordinator they like. They do have some draft capital, of course, as well, that they can make happen. But yeah, I agree. I feel worse about the Eagles today than I did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to with all that movement. I mean, we knew they were going to lose some guys, but they lost a lot more than we expected, I think, even too. Oh, did Darius Slay get released too? Is that the other one I saw?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought that was the 4 because that was him, Melton Williams, Josh Sweat, and then CJ Gardner-Johnson. And then they also lost Oren Burks, but he was a backup and then became the starter in the Super Bowl. So that was kind of a weird one.
Yeah, I think I was factoring in Burke, so never mind. But yeah, I mean, that's a big.
Well, you were correct. You just in a weird way.
Yeah, that's big questions going forward for sure. So I'm still not gonna write off the Eagles or anything like that, but definitely some questions.
Yeah. What do you think about the Davante Adams to the Rams move?
Really good. Obviously, they got to figure out this Cooper Kupp thing, but yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good receiver duo. They bring back Alaric Jackson, Tutu Atwell too, who I thought was really good in times last year when Kupp was hurt and when Nakua was hurt. So they have a really dynamic team again. I think the Rams are probably my pick to win the NFC West. They might be my second best team in the NFC right now. We'll see. Maybe third best team in the NFC. We'll see. But yeah, I think that they have a really dynamic team, and I expect them to be a lot better.
Yeah, and we talked about them actually having cap space for the first time in forever, right? Which is an unusual thing. The question you have, I think, is like, okay, what are we getting out of Davante Adams? He is 32 at this point and is still an effective player. I wouldn't say he's in his prime, what he was for when he was the best receiver in football. But yeah, I mean, he's still a really effective player, and it seems like a match made in heaven for this offense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think he's going to make a lot of sense in this offense. But yeah, I mean, is he as effective as he was at his peak? Probably not. But I think he's going to be effective in this offense. This is going to be better coordinator play than he's had in some time too, since back in Green Bay. And, it's a 2-year window, it feels like now, with him and Stafford, right? They're going to go for it these next 2 years and then figure out the future. and I don't hate it at all. I think that they should be the front runners in the NFC West the next 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the 49ers, we'll see. I mean, the 49ers have bled a lot of talent this season as well. Still wouldn't have minded to see them help out the secondary a little bit more.
Yeah. Still got some time. I think the secondary market was booming. Like those guys got paid. Except for I will say the two guys who have to fire their agents are DJ Reed and Javon Holland.
Yeah. What happened there? Trayvon Moehrig got more than Javon Holland.
It was bizarre. I don't know how that happened.
And Joshua, there was a couple of weird ones where like early on, everyone was getting paid like Javon Kinlaw $15 million, like Trayvon Moehrig $50 million. It's like, okay, everyone's getting $15 million, and then Javon Holland gets $15 million, and then Josh Sweat gets like $18 million. It's like, what happened? I thought you were going to get like ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, definitely a bizarre one there. I mean, the Holland one, I guess it makes their Stafford buzz a little more like sense because now they add him and they added Paulson Adebo, who I think is a good corner too. Like they fixed that part of their defense and not all of it. That's still not an awesome secondary. It's a little bit better. So maybe they viewed that and like bringing in Stafford could really help change this team. Maybe they still add a quarterback here in the next few weeks, but yeah, I mean, I guess there is some logic now to what the Giants were thinking at that time. And they addressed it in free agency. They got better, no doubt.
Yeah. I had two teams left I want to talk about. First, the Bears, who we don't spend forever on them, but just, going after the trenches, specifically with their offensive line. They felt good about their tackles being Darnold Wright and Braxton Jones. They traded for Joe Thuney, former Patriot. They also added Drew Dahlman, and they traded for Jonah Jackson. So getting three, on paper, very good offensive linemen. We'll have to see how they all play together, but clearly, I mean, the Ben Johnson thing, he wants to help out the offensive line. That was an issue that they needed to improve upon last year, and they have improved upon it.
Yeah. They definitely went big on the trenches. They also added two defensive linemen in Grady Jarrett and Dayo Adiegbo. So, yeah, they spent a lot of money there. They spent a lot of capital there, but they definitely got better at that group. That is a upper tier, that's elite level interior offensive line. And they had two pretty good tackles to begin with. So I definitely don't hate that group. They maybe spent a little more than I expected on a guy like Grady Jarrett, but maybe they viewed it as like, that's a luxury position at this point. Let's just go get the guy we want. And the trenches for the Bears should be significantly better. I like what they did this offseason.
Yeah. We have a super chat from the great Overlap 618 saying, That's it, Jackson. This is the final straw. You have put out videos, anti-sports, I believe it's supposed to say betting, deliberately to derail overlappicks.com when we are winning 90% picks 40% of the time. That is correct, Overlap. I apologize.
Oh, my gosh. You're turning our own sponsor against us.
Is that how you have so much money? Because you run a gambling? That actually makes sense.
Yeah. So we're taking in illegal money here. That's all we're doing.
Well, hopefully it's a legal gambling site, at least.
You think overlappicks.com is a legal gambling site?
Okay. Fair enough. You might have a point there. Again, not too much to talk about for the Bears, but figure we should mention it. The last team I want to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs, who have had a busy offseason, as obviously the Joe Thuney move was kind of a shock that I was very surprised by, but they did address the tackle position, which we figured they would at some point. They, seemingly are going to put Sumatea in at guard, so we'll see how it all works. Jalen Moore is the tackle they added, who has never had a season where he's had enough snaps to qualify for PFF rankings, but he has graded well as a backup for a couple of years. Again, they're taking a risk here for a player who's played well as a backup, but is just a backup. And for the Chiefs, they also they re-signed Hollywood Brown. They also added Christian Fulton. So they've added some pieces here. It's a very interesting offseason. What do you think of it? Yeah.
As long as their receiver room isn't suspended, it's going to be absolutely nasty. I really like that, and I understand the logic to that. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that they got worse in the offensive line, and they're betting on young talent, and that they can develop young talent. And I mean, we just haven't seen them do that over the last, 2 seasons with those guys at the left tackle position. So we will see. But like you said, it is a huge risk to bet on Sumatea and Jalen Moore, but who knows? It could work out. They got Jalen Moore at a pretty good number, I thought, and I thought they managed to bringing back Nick Bolton. I think was a priority for them. They get Christian Fulton as another corner. They bring back Marquise Brown, so they have some nice pieces there. I still think they're going to be okay. I still think overall they probably took a small step back as far as the offensive line goes, and I just need to see that work out before I can actually be convinced, because I'm not convinced it's going to work out right now.
Yeah, that is the concern. They've kind of lost the benefit of the doubt these past couple of years with the offensive line stuff. Kyle, I have news involving a former Kansas City Chief player that I just broke. DeAndre Hopkins signs a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Baltimore Ravens.
All right. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't very productive last season. I think he's a little bit past, but $5 million, it's pretty good chance there.
Yeah, it feels like you're getting at the very least, he was a role player for the Chiefs. He feels like he could get that. But yeah, we'll see what the Chiefs do. I don't have any other major things I want to talk about. Was there anything you wanted to mention?
I could do a couple quick hitters. I liked what the Colts did a lot. I thought they really got some good players in the secondary. Daniel Jones is a good backup, and he's one of those guys where I don't love Daniel Jones obviously, but he could come in and play, and it's probably not much worse than Anthony Richardson, and maybe that combination could keep him in playoff contention. So I like that one. I have no idea what the Jaguars are doing. It just seems like they're handing money to anybody. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not overly optimistic with that strategy. And I really like what the Broncos did. That's another one I really like, because bringing in those two San Francisco guys. Hufanga was hurt a lot last season. He's proven to be a very good player when he's healthy. And Dre Greenlaw is obviously a very good linebacker. That defense is going to be insane. Would you bet on that being the best defense in football next year?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Pretty awesome. I would have liked to bring in one more receiver overall for them, but Sean Payton develops receivers, so maybe he's just not worried about it.
I think he just doesn't care. I think he's like, receivers, whatever.
I mean, he's done so well with them throughout his career. I mean, it's hard not to bet on it.
Yeah. Can't. He has the benefit of the doubt. Only other team I thought of when you were talking was not crazy about the Carolina Panthers offseason so far. Feels like they've thrown a lot of money at guys who I think will help, but I don't know if they're moving the needle enough for the money that they spent with guys like Trevor Moorhig, who again I think is a fine player, Trayshawn Wharton, who I think is a fine player, but they kind of paid those guys top of the market money. Yeah.
I mean, it is a lot of names, but Derek Brown's going to be what they're hoping helps their defense a lot, and then we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, I mean, I'm not anticipating being an awesome defense overall, but it just felt like they were the ones that it was rumored that they got Milton Williams, and then the Patriots came over the top with a big offer, and I think they missed out on a few of those top name guys for sure.
Yeah, people love what is the obsession that some reporters have with just tweeting out oh, I'm hearing this player sign with this team, and they're obviously lying. They obviously are just making something up.
Yeah. Well, I think Schefter tweeted it. He actually said that it was done or close to done. And then
I can double check.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was exactly that sits Williams to the Panthers, but it seemed like a dumb deal based on who reported it. But then, the Patriots came in. So, yeah, there is a lot of those rumor guys and those, those trolls out there. So it makes it difficult to tell exactly what's going on. Didn't love the Cowboys' inactivity either. I got to say, that's a team that felt like it had some obvious holes to fill, and another one that kind of felt like it missed out on everybody.
Yeah. Michael 329 saying, I know you're scared of my Panthers, Jackson. Very afraid. Yes.
He was scared to pick them again.
Yes, I believed in you guys once, and you ruined it, Michael. I can't pick them again.
Poor Panthers. They'll be okay. But yeah, we'll do more of a deep dive on every team. So if you didn't hear your name mentioned this one, don't worry. You will be mentioned soon. We just doing the biggest news here this week.
Yeah, I think what we'll do next week on Wednesday. Let's split it up by conference, just because that we have more time to get into each team. We'll go, we'll figure out whatever conference has more to talk about. We'll do that next week, and then we'll do the other conference the week after. So, next week we will go conference by conference, getting into the details about every move that each of the teams made, and we'll give our grades for them as well. So, we have to talk about this, Kyle, before we head out. Does Kyle have any thoughts on the Brad Marchand trade?
No, I hate the sport. It's over, so who cares?
That's like the worst thing. Like, at least, Kyle, both of our hockey team's captains have left this season. At least, like, for me, it was like, okay, well, we're getting this other good player. For you, it's just we're getting a second-round pick that could become a first-round pick from the Panthers, who not everyone picking that high. What are you doing?
Yeah, don't love it. Didn't love it, but, I mean, they dominated the Lightning right after the trade deadline, so maybe it turns the season around. Fingers crossed.
Possibly. Yeah, that was the worst. That was the most hungover Lightning team I think we've of all time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving goals from like center ice, it's probably not working out for you.
They just had automate. It was a 3:00 game. Like Yanni Gord had just gotten there. I'm like, yeah, this team is. There's no way they did not. They weren't out until morning the night before.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully expect Marchand to score the oh no, he's not playing today. So it's right. They definitely needed to blow it up. I just hated that Marchand got traded to that team of all teams.
Yeah.
I hate those guys.
Yeah, it's just you can't do that. You can't trade the captain of your team to a division rival that knocked you out of the playoffs in 2 years. Like you if you can't get a draft pick, don't get the draft pick.
Yeah. What a bummer. Oh well. Whatever. Hockey's dumb. We're moving on. It's baseball season. Here we go.
Who are you rooting for, Indy? Is it just anyone who's not in the division of the Lightning, Leafs, and Panthers?
Oh, to win like the Cup?
Yeah.
That Dallas team's pretty fun. They got a ton of attacking talent. That's a good team. I think the idea of seeing McDavid win would be cool too, just because, McDavid win all of a sudden makes the best of all time conversations a little more interesting if he can win some cups and all that sort of thing, and probably starts him on his path for that, especially after scoring the game winner in that Four Nations game. So, I think it's fun.
Yeah. We'll see. Sorry for talking about hockey, Kyle. We don't have to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good. It is what it is. Tough season for sure.
Yeah. Kyle, let me know where you can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gron, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
What is this random guy in the chat just saying Kyle is a beta?
The guy sitting at home by himself is chatting to me on our video, saying that I'm the beta. Got it.
Hey, you don't know. They might not be by themselves. Maybe they're at a party.
You think so?
I think we play in a lot of parties.
Yeah, I'm not overly optimistic for that.
Okay, yeah, okay. As always, I will upload these podcasts in audio only form anywhere you get your podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can search that there. But yeah, Kyle, any final thoughts? You're ready to get out of here.
PSG win on penalties. I was right. Let's do it. Good stuff.
Yes, of course. Thank you to everybody for watching or listening. We do appreciate it. And until next time, which will be Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, have a good one.
Peace.